Hello and welcome to Bread of Life, a daily devotional program which each week features a different area pastor. Our speaker for this week is Pastor Kerry Schmidt of Newington.
Well, this weekend we're examining one simple thought about making good decisions, and that is that good calls bless others. The kingdom of King David is being established in 1 Samuel chapter 18, and then in chapter 19, something beautiful and unusual happens. David says, after being established and preserved, David turns to those that are his confidants, and he says, "Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" David's response to being established by God and preserved by God was that he wanted to bless others. He wanted to use his kingdom and his resources, his wealth and his power as opportunities to bless others. Well, he turns to the house of Saul, which is unthinkable and unusual because the house of Saul had been fighting against his house for maybe 15 years or more. House of Saul was his enemy. And yet there was a man in the house of Saul named Jonathan that had been a Jesus-like friend to David at the most dark and difficult time of his life. And he made a covenant with Jonathan, David did, and said that he would be kind to his descendants. And so now, once his house is established, David wants to make good on the covenant that he made to Jonathan. And he's told there in chapter 19 that there is one of the house of Saul, and his name is Mephibosheth. And he is lame. His name means shameful thing. He lives in a land called Lodebar. He's kind of in hiding. He probably thinks that David would want him dead if he knows about him. He's lame because of being maimed and hurt when he was being rescued after his father and grandfather were killed. It's an incredible story. Well, David, when he finds out about Jonathan's son Mephibosheth, he sends someone to go get him. I can imagine the fear and the terror that would have come up in Mephibosheth's heart when somebody shows up at his house and says, "King David wants to see you." Well, to make a long story short, he's brought to David and he falls before his face, and there he is, crippled and lame and relatively useless by his own estimation, by the estimation of others. And David says to Mephibosheth, "I'm going to adopt you. You're going to be my son. You're going to sit and eat at my table. You're coming into my household, and I'm going to bless you." It is a beautiful, beautiful picture of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because you and I are Mephibosheth. We do not deserve God's grace and kindness. Jesus is our David. And as Mephibosheth was condemned, so I was condemned. As Mephibosheth was crippled, so I am crippled by sin. And as Mephibosheth was hiding for his life, so I'm tempted to hide from God and from his power and his holiness. As Mephibosheth was sought out by a saving king, so Jesus came to seek and to save you and me. As Mephibosheth was exposed and weak and vulnerable, so I am before God. As Mephibosheth was undeserving of honor and a place at the king's table, so I am undeserving of a seat at the table of grace. As Mephibosheth was born an enemy of the king, but adopted as a son, so I was born an enemy of God, but I've been adopted through Jesus. As Mephibosheth was humbled by King David's unmerited grace and kindness, so God's lavish, costly, inexhaustible grace has been poured out upon me and should humble me. You see, because I was Mephibosheth and Jesus was my David, so now I'm compelled in love to be David to another Mephibosheth. And friend, I hope you'll take that beautiful story today, and number one, that it will humble you before the Lord and allow you to worship him with a heart that is renewed in spirit and in truth. And then, friend, I hope that you will take that worship, that great love that God's poured out to you, and turn around and decide to be a blessing. Let God bless you that you might bless others. May God bless you as you worship him today.
You've been listening to Pastor Kerry Schmidt of Newington, and this has been Bread of Life, a program to encourage you from God's Word.